Hey, what's up guys? Hope you are doing well. Today we are creating this marquee-like content scrolling effect with HTML and CSS. This is a nice way to display some kind of information to the user. For example, here is some text, could be news, special offers, stock prices, foreign exchange rates, etc. Here are some images and here is a logo slider. I hope you will get some value out of this video. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and without further ado, let's go! This is our starting point. I've created two files, the index.html and style.css files. In the index.html file, I typed some basic HTML5 boilerplate code, inserted the title, Marquee-like Content Scrolling, and linked the document to the external style sheet, the style.css file, which is currently empty. And we can now proceed to defining the content for the body. But before proceeding to the actual implementation, I would like to mention the existence of the marquee tag, which can be used to insert a scrolling area of text. And let's set behavior to scroll, which is the default by the way, and direction to left, which is also the default. And let's insert some text here, hello world. I know, very original. And let's save and open the project in the browser. I'll be using the live server Visual Studio Code extension. Indeed, we can see the text scrolling from right to left, and this will be repeated infinitely in a cyclical manner. So theoretically, we could use the marquee element as a starting point for our project, right? Wrong, because the marquee element is obsolete. Although it may still work in some browsers, its use is discouraged since it could be removed at any time. Try to avoid using it. Okay, so let's forget about using the HTML marquee element, and we'll later use CSS in order to implement the desired behavior. So let's create our custom marquee element. This will be a div element with the class marquee, which will contain a UL element with the class marquee content. So the marquee element will be the static, the fixed part, and this will be the moving part. And let's add a few list items, let's say 9. And that's all with the HTML markup. Let's proceed to CSS. For starters, I will just paste some basic styling in order to save some time, just importing the Montserrat font family, resetting margin and padding to 0 and box sizing to border box for all elements, and for the body setting font family, background color, and finally using flexbox in order to center the content. Not necessarily something I would do in a real life project. This is just for presentational purposes. I think it looks better centered. So let's save. Okay, and let's proceed to styling the marquee element. Background color, and let's use this color, very dark gray, almost black. And color, let's use this color, very light gray, almost white. Nice, but for now let's use some other color so that everything is visible, since this color is the same as the body background color. So let's use tomato. For some reason I like this color. Okay, and let's set width for the marquee element to 80% of viewport width. and height to 20% of viewport height. We'll also want to hide the content which extends beyond the marquee area, and for this purpose we'll make use of the overflow property and set it to hidden. However, for now let's keep everything visible in order to have the full picture. And now let's proceed to styling the marquee content element. Let's start by setting list style to none. Let's set height to 100% of its parent element, so it will occupy the entire height of the marquee element. And let's set display to flex in order to display its content in a row. Now this will be the moving part, so in a while we'll define an animation for this element. However, let's first define the styling for individual list items. For starters, let's add a border around each li just in order to be able to see the area it occupies. And let's use the color teal. And now let's set width to 20 viewport width. Recall that the width for the marquee element is 80 viewport width, so we expect to have 4 list items within the marquee area. Not exactly what we wanted, and that's because the default value for the flex shrink factor is 1. In order for the flex items to shrink, in order to fit into their flex container. So in order to prevent the elements from shrinking, let's set this value to 0. Very nice, and you are starting to see where we are getting at with this. Recall that the part beyond the marquee boundaries will be hidden. And once again, let's use Flexbox to center the content. And let's set font size to 5 rem. And let's also set white space to no wrap, just in order to ensure that text will never wrap to the next line, unless of course a BR tag is encountered. And now let's define the animation for the marquee content. Let's name the animation scrolling. And let's set animation duration to 10 seconds, animation timing function to linear, and animation iteration count to infinite. And let's specify the animation. Now, this could be our starting point, or we could start from the right edge. Let's do the latter. So in this case, we would like to move the marquee content to the right by 80 viewport width. And eventually, we want to move the marquee content to the left by 9 times 20 viewport width, so by 180 viewport width. So let's save and see the result. Nice, and let's uncomment the overflow hidden here. Let's also change the color. And let's also remove the border. Nice, but what if we wanted to have a continuous flow of marquee elements? So for example, when 9 is here, to also have numbers 1, 2, 3 displayed? Well, in this case, we should duplicate elements here, but how many elements? Well, at least marquee width, in this case 80 viewport width, divided by each element's width, which is 20 viewport width. So we should repeat at least 4 elements. Now, if we duplicated more than 4 elements, then we wouldn't have any problem, since animation would restart each time, simply ignoring the extra elements. However, if we duplicated less than 4 elements, then there would be some empty space at the end of each animation repetition. If we don't want to duplicate elements, we can use JavaScript to automate this process, and in fact we'll do this towards the end of this video. And now, just in order to better see what's happening, let's add background color to the duplicated elements. So let's save and see the result. Here are the duplicated elements. Okay, but in order to have a continuous flow, rather than starting the animation from the right edge, let's start from 0. Let's save and see the result. Here are the duplicated elements. And as soon as animation restarts, duplicated elements are replaced by the original elements instantly, and animation continues. Nice. Okay, let's remove background color from duplicated elements. Now we could make the entrance and exit of elements a bit more gradual by adding linear gradient to the left and right edges of the marquee element. For this purpose, we could create 2 separate elements and place them to the left and right edges, or alternatively, we could make use of the before and after pseudo elements over the marquee element. Let's take the latter approach, and let's paste this part and quickly go through it. So we are absolutely positioning the before and after pseudo elements relative to the marquee element. So let's add position relative here. We are placing the before pseudo element to the left edge by setting top and left position to 0 and height to 100% of the marquee element. And similarly, we are placing the after pseudo element to the right edge. Width is set to 10 rem, content is empty since we are only interested in setting width and height for the elements and therefore for linear gradient, which is actually considered to be background image. And finally, we set z index to 1 just in order to make sure that these elements are placed on top of the marquee element. Now for the left element, we set background to linear gradient with direction to right, starting from this color at 0%, which is the left edge, and ending to transparent at 100%, which is 10 rem from the left edge. And similarly for the right element, just changing direction from right to left. If you are interested in a more detailed explanation of linear gradient, a while ago I've created a video on this topic, so feel free to check it out. I will also include a link in the description. Okay, let's save and see the result. Indeed, now we can see the gradual entrance and exit of elements. Nice. We could also pause the animation when mouse is over the marquee content. So let's demonstrate this. Marquee content, hover, and in this case we want to set animation play state to post. And let's test. Indeed, when mouse is over the marquee content, animation is paused. Nice. But let's comment this out for now. Okay, we are done with the basics. So you can now take these core concepts and create and style the marquee elements you want. However, why not make our code a bit more maintainable? For example, here, instead of manually making the calculation, why not just use the calc CSS function? So let's do this. So we want to move to the left by 20 viewport width times 9. Nice, but what if we changed the number of elements here? Well, in this case, we should return to our CSS, find this point here and change the number. Or alternatively, we could define CSS variables at the top of our page and use them. Now, before proceeding, I should mention that by using CSS variables or custom properties, we will lose a small percentage of browser support, since up to 21st of May 2019, browser support for CSS variables covers around 92% of global usage. So this is a decision you have to make. Now let's declare CSS variables within the root selector, so they will have a global scope. The root selector is similar to the HTML selector, however it has a class level specificity since it is a pseudo class, so it actually overrides the HTML selector. The variable name must begin with 2 dashes and it is case sensitive. For starters, let's declare the marquee width variable and let's set it to 80 viewport width. Let's continue by declaring the marquee height and let's set it to 20 viewport height. Next, let's set the number of marquee elements to 9. So if number of marquee elements changed, then we should manually refresh the number here, since there is no way of counting the number of marquee content children with CSS. Next, let's set the marquee elements displayed number, and in our example this number was equal to 4, 80 viewport width divided by 20, which was the width of an element. Next, let's calculate and store into a variable the marquee element width. This should be equal to the marquee width divided by the marquee elements displayed. So calc, and we have to use the var function in order to access a CSS variable. So it's equal to marquee width divided by the marquee elements displayed. And finally, let's declare the marquee animation duration variable. In our example, this value was set to 10 seconds. We could alternatively somehow link this value to the number of marquee elements. So for example, let's set marquee animation duration to calc marquee elements times, let's say, 2 seconds. Okay, now let's replace the corresponding values in the style sheet with our custom properties values. Okay, I hope I didn't forget anything. We could even set font size for marquee element to be relative to marquee height. For example, let's set it to be equal to marquee height times 2 divided by 3. So it will be equal to 2/3 of marquee height. Of course, in the case of a larger text, we would probably decrease the font size. Okay, let's save and see the result. Seems to be working smoothly, and let's see the change here once it gets to 4. Nice. Now for smaller screens, I think we could add some very basic responsiveness just in order to make it look a bit better. I will just paste this part. I will of course include a link in the description to the entire project. So for screens with 600 pixels or less width, these styling rules apply. So we reset root font size to 12 pixels. This affects the REM units. Recall that R stands for root. We also reset some CSS variables or custom properties values. So we set marquee width to 100% of viewport width so that we utilize the entire width in case of smaller screens. We also reset marquee height to 16 viewport height and marquee elements displayed to 3 instead of 4 so that we have a bit more space for each element. So notice how easier it is to maintain and manipulate CSS styling when using CSS variables. Okay, and finally we reduce the linear gradient width to the left and right edges of the marquee element. So let's save and see the result. Looks better, I think. Okay. Now, instead of manually duplicating elements here, or counting the marquee elements and setting the number here, we could take this a step further and use JavaScript in order to perform these tasks. So at this point, the scrolling animation is broken since marquee elements variable is not defined. So let's first create our JavaScript file and let's name it main.js. And let's link the JavaScript file to the document. Or alternatively, instead of placing the script at the end of the body, we could place it in the head using the defer attribute, which indicates to browser that the script is meant to be executed after the document has been parsed. And the overall execution of the script actually is faster because this way the script has been downloaded in parallel with the HTML parsing. Browser support for defer attribute is close to 98%. Okay, let's move on to our JavaScript file. For starters, let's access the root element of the document and store it into a variable. Next, we need to access the value of the marquee elements displayed custom property in order to know how many elements to duplicate. We'll make use of the getComputedStyle method, which returns an object containing the values of all CSS properties of an element. And specifically, we are interested in getting the property value for the marquee elements displayed property. And finally, we'll need to access the marquee content element in order to be able to append the duplicated elements. Okay, now let's set the marquee elements custom property over the root element. So root.style.set property. Marquee elements is the property we want to set, and the value we want to set it to is marquee content dot children dot length. Okay, so now if we save, we can see that scrolling animation is now working, but we expect to have empty spaces at the end of the animation since we didn't duplicate elements yet. Here we are. Okay. So let's use a for loop in order to clone marquee elements displayed elements and append them to marquee content. And let's first clone the ith child of marquee content. And we now want to append this cloned element to marquee content as a child. And that's all with JavaScript. Let's see the result. 9. Now we expect the duplicated elements. Here we are, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Very nice. And if we inspect elements, let's see if the duplicated elements were indeed created. Here we are, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay. And we are actually done, but before closing the video, let's quickly go through a few use cases. Let's first turn this into a logo slider. For this purpose, I'll be using Font Awesome logo icons, so let's include Font Awesome in our project. And let's paste the logos we want to display. Nice. Save. And let's just change the marquee elements displayed variable to 5 instead of 4. So let's save and see the result. Okay, looks nice. Next, let's display simple scrolling text. So only two marquee elements here. One says coding journey and the other one says it's all about the journey. Let's save. And let's display one element at a time. Let's also increase animation duration since we only have 2 elements now. And let's also make a few more styling changes, reversing background color with color. And let's also change the linear gradient color here. Okay, let's save. Nice. This would probably look better on top. I would also reduce font size. And if we wanted to increase the distance between the two elements, we could insert empty elements between them. For example, we could add an li here and one more here. Let's save. Okay, better, I think. Nice. And finally, we'll add images as marquee content, but let's first create a new folder and name it images. And let's move the images in here. Okay. Let's paste the marquee elements containing the images. And now regarding the styling, let's set marquee height to 30 viewport height, marquee elements displayed to 3, and let's make the animation a bit faster, multiplying by 3 instead of 4. Let's also reduce linear gradient width to left and right edges to 1 rem. And since we are now having images, let's not forget to define dimensions. I will just set the width so that aspect ratio is preserved. And let's also add a border around each image. Okay, let's save and see the result. Excellent. Okay guys, let's leave it here. I hope you enjoyed this video and got some value out of it. For any questions, suggestions, or just to say hi, please use the comment section below. Hit the like button if you like this video and share it with anyone who might be interested. Also, don't forget to subscribe if you want more. Till next time, keep coding, keep improving, and enjoy the journey. Take care. Bye.